Welcome to Dreamy Old Stories. Here we tell slow and gentle tales from history. Stories that calm your mind and help you fall asleep. If you enjoy the journey, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin tonight's dreamy story. Hey there. Welcome back to another long, quiet ramble through the museum of half-forgotten history. Tonight's story isn't about kings or wars or scandalous marriages. Well, not directly. It's about the objects they left behind, the things that outlasted them, the relics that somehow ended up buried, broken, and then dramatically rediscovered by someone with a shovel and way too much optimism. So, grab your blanket, dim the lights, and let's sink into the slow hum of time. Because tonight, we're taking a calm walk through the world's most mysterious lost artifacts. The kind that whisper instead of shout. The Rosetta Stone. The rock that solved a 1,500-year problem. Let's start with the celebrity of the archaeology world. The Rosetta Stone. Imagine being a perfectly ordinary slab of rock, minding your own business in 196 BC Egypt, when some priest decides to carve 3 versions of the same announcement into your face. That's right, the Rosetta Stone isn't a mystical object or a map to hidden treasure. It's basically an ancient government press release. The decree carved into it celebrates King Ptolemy V, who was about 13 years old at the time, because nothing says competent ruler like a child king with priests. Declaring his greatness in 3 languages. There's hieroglyphic for the gods, Demotic for the common people, and Greek for the elite. It's the ancient version of subtitles. Really, fast forward a couple thousand years to 1799. Napoleon's troops are stomping around Egypt, half conquering, half looting, when one soldier near a town called Rosetta, modern-day Rashid, digs up the stone while building a fort. He probably just wanted a foundation block. Instead, he found the key to deciphering Egyptian writing. Of course, France couldn't hold on to it for long. The British showed up, won a few battles, and said, "Nice rock, we'll take it." They hauled it off to the British Museum, where it's been sitting ever since, still causing passive-aggressive tension between London and Cairo. The real hero, though, was Jean-François Champollion, a French linguist who cracked the code in 1822 after decades of obsession. He literally fainted when he realized hieroglyphs weren't just symbols, they had sounds. Scholars say he ran around shouting, "I've done it," which must have been quite the scene for a man who hadn't left his study in weeks. The stone itself, still just a hunk of granodiorite with a chip out of the corner. But somehow, it's the most famous rock on Earth. Sorry. Dwayne Johnson. The Antikythera mechanism. The ancient Greek iphonal. Let's float over to Greece, specifically the Aegean Sea in 1900. Where some sponge divers stumbled upon an underwater time capsule, a shipwreck, barnacle-covered bronze, and inside, something that looked like a lump of corrosion. At first, nobody cared. Then they noticed tiny gears, dozens of them, perfectly cut, interlocking, impossibly precise. What they'd found was the Antikythera mechanism. Basically, the world's first analog computer. It predicted eclipses, tracked planetary positions, and marked Olympic Games, because apparently, even 2,000 years ago, Greeks needed to know when Mercury was in retrograde. It dates back to around 100 BC, built during a time when the Romans were still figuring out plumbing. No one's sure who made it, though some suspect Hipparchus or Archimedes. Either way, someone in a toga was out here building miniature universes out of bronze, while the rest of the world was counting with pebbles. The mechanism was so advanced that nothing like it appeared again for over 1,000 years. Medieval Europe was still using sundials, while some long-lost Greek engineer had already built a cosmic smartwatch today. Scientists have recreated it with X-ray imaging and 3D scans. But the original remains mostly a green lump of corroded metal. It's quietly stored in a glass case in Athens, still refusing to give up all its secrets. Like the cool kid at the museum party who knows they're the smartest one there. The Dead Sea, scrolls, ancient notes in a desert jungle. Let's wander east to the barren cliffs near Qumran, where, in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a rock into a cave and heard the sound of pottery breaking. He climbed inside, expecting maybe treasure or snakes. Instead, he found clay jars filled with brittle scrolls wrapped in linen. They'd been sitting there since around 100 BC, completely forgotten. Those scrolls turned out to be the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the oldest surviving copies of biblical texts. They contained everything from fragments of the book of Isaiah to random community rules like don't steal someone's dinner, apparently. Even ancient religious sects struggled with roommates. The scrolls were hidden during a time of turmoil. The Roman occupation of Judea, and probably stashed by a group called the Essenes, who were basically monastic hermits with strong opinions about purity and ritual baths for centuries. They stayed perfectly preserved thanks to the dry desert air, until a bored shepherd with good aim accidentally rewrote biblical history. After the discovery, scholars, priests, and governments fought over them for decades, because of course they did. Nothing brings out human pettiness like 2,000-year-old parchment today. The scrolls rest in the shrine of the book in Jerusalem, a sleek, white UFO-looking museum. It's poetic, really. The holiest of writings, found by chance, now displayed under fluorescent lighting beside a gift shop. The terracotta army, clay soldiers for a lonely emperor now. Let's float further east to Xi'an, China. It's 1974. A group of farmers are digging a well, just trying to find water. Instead, their shovels hit the head of a life-sized clay soldier. They'd just uncovered the terracotta army, one of the most jaw-dropping archaeological discoveries in history. Over 8,000 soldiers, each one unique. Different faces, hairstyles, armor, lined up in perfect formation, guarding the tomb of China's first emperor. Qin Shi Huang, the guy who unified the country, standardized the currency, and apparently had a serious control problem. He wanted protection in the afterlife. And when you're the emperor, you don't settle for a few symbolic statues. You order an entire ghost army. They were built around 210 BC, crafted by tens of thousands of workers who probably didn't get great dental care. The soldiers once carried real weapons, bronze swords and spears, and were painted in bright colors. Sadly, most of the paint flaked off within minutes of exposure to air during excavation. So now, they're all stylishly beige. The emperor's actual tomb remains sealed. Legends say it's filled with rivers of mercury, a detail both poetic and toxic. Scientists have tested the soil and, high mercury levels, meaning he might have actually tried to recreate heaven underground. Or he just really liked shiny things. The terracotta army stands as a monument to paranoia, power, and the strange human refusal to accept that you can't take your soldiers with you. The Sutton, who treasure a ship buried for a ghost. King will sail next to misty Suffolk. England, the year is 1939. A woman named Edith Pretty, living on a quiet estate, had a few grassy mounds in her backyard. They looked suspiciously like burial sites. She hired a local archaeologist named Basil Brown, who started digging just before World War II broke out. What they found beneath the largest mound stopped everyone cold. A full-size ship, buried under the earth. Inside, an incredible treasure hoard. Gold buckles, silver dishes, jeweled clasps, the works that turned out to be the Sutton Hoo ship burial, dated to around the early 7th century. Likely the grave of King Ridwald of East Anglia, though, as with most early medieval kings, no one's entirely sure he existed outside of dramatic chronicles. Written by monks who loved gossip, the craftsmanship was astonishing. The helmet alone looked like something out of a fantasy novel, ornate, grim, and regal. The kind of thing you'd wear to look terrifying while negotiating a peace treaty. Sutton, who changed how historians viewed the so-called Dark Ages. Turns out, they weren't so dark, just dimly lit by gold and silver under the English soil. And in perfect irony, the discovery happened right before Britain plunged into another war. For a brief moment, everyone stopped worrying about bombs and looked at the ground beneath their feet, and realized their ancestors had already buried their own kingdoms long ago. The Venus of Willendorf, prehistoric body, positivity, let's drift way, way back now. Around 25,000 years ago, give or take, a small, round figurine carved from limestone emerges from the soil near Willendorf, Austria, in 1908. She's tiny, about 4 inches tall, but she's got presence, wide hips, full belly, heavy breasts, and no face, just curves and power. This is the Venus of Willendorf, one of the oldest known representations of the human form. Some call her a fertility idol. Others say she's prehistoric art. Personally, she looks like the world's earliest love your body statement. Nobody knows who carved her or why, but she's clearly meant to celebrate abundance. A big deal when survival meant hunting, gathering, and hoping winter didn't kill you. For 25,000 years, she sat buried in silence while empires rose, fell, and reinvented beauty standards 100 times over. Yet somehow, this little limestone woman remains the oldest testament to the fact that humans have always found ways to appreciate themselves, or at least carve themselves out of boredom. The Baghdad Battery, electricity, maybe, probably not tanned. Now we wander to Iraq. Near Baghdad, in the 1930s, archaeologists digging through ancient Parthian ruins found a small clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. Someone said, "Wait, that's a battery." And thus began decades of debate over the so-called Baghdad Battery. A 2,000-year-old device that might, possibly, have generated a weak electric current when filled with vinegar or lemon juice. Was it used for electroplating jewelry? Some ritual science experiment? A forgotten ancient prank? No one knows. Most likely, it wasn't a battery at all, but a container for sacred scrolls. But that hasn't stopped countless documentaries from calling it proof that ancient aliens helped us with early electricity. Because of course they did. Whatever it was, the jar sits quietly in the National Museum of Iraq. A reminder that sometimes a clay pot is just a clay pot, but if you add enough imagination, it becomes a symbol of lost genius, the Shroud of Turin, the world's most controversial bedsheet finally for tonight. We'll float to Turin, Italy. In a cathedral, locked in a silver chest, lies a length of linen bearing the faint image of a man's face and body, complete with wounds matching crucifixion. It's the Shroud of Turin. believed by many to be the burial cloth of Jesus himself. Others say it's a medieval forgery. Scientists have dated it to the 14th century. But the debate refuses to die, like ironically. The man it's supposed to depict. The image isn't painted or drawn. It's imprinted, almost like a photographic negative. No one can fully explain how. It's either a miracle or a very elaborate art project from someone who had too much time in a monastery. Whatever the truth, the shroud remains one of history's most quietly haunting relics. Pilgrims travel thousands of miles just to look at it. Skeptics call it nonsense. And the cloth just lies there, doing what it's done for centuries, keeping its secrets. The Ark of the Covenant, a divine shipping crate lit S-drift into one of history's most famously missing objects, the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, the very one supposedly holding the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. Basically, a sacred box that was part reliquary, part divine power source, and part theological mystery for the last 3,000 years. The Ark appears in the Hebrew Bible as a gold-covered chest built to exact specifications. Acacia wood, to cherubim on top, poles for carrying. Because you were not supposed to touch it, ever. People who did tended to, well, stop living. For centuries, it was said to rest in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, where it served as God's footstool on earth. No pressure there. Then the Babylonians showed up around 586 BC. The temple was destroyed, and the Ark disappeared. Since then, it's been the world's most famous lost and found case. Some say it's buried under the Temple Mount. Others claim it was spirited away to Ethiopia, guarded by monks in Axum who politely refused to let anyone check. Indiana Jones made a movie about it, but the real one, if it still exists, is probably just sitting quietly in a dark room somewhere, not melting faces, just collecting dust. For an object meant to contain divine law, it's been oddly good at violating the first rule of museums. Label your exhibits, the Amber Room. When Russia misplaced a palace now, let's float to 18th century Prussia, because nothing says royal excess like decorating an entire chamber with fossilized tree sap. The Amber Room was a masterpiece built for Frederick I of Prussia in the early 1700s, later gifted to Peter the Great of Russia. A diplomatic move that basically said, here, take this glowing honey-colored cave of luxury. Imagine walls entirely covered in amber panels. Gold, leaf, mirrors, mosaics. The whole place looked like the inside of a gemstone. Visitors said it glowed like frozen sunlight. Fast forward to World War II. The Nazis, who were basically the world's worst antique collectors, dismantled the room piece by piece and shipped it to King. Then it vanished. Allied bombs flattened the city, and the Amber Room was never seen again. Some believe it burned. Others whisper it's hidden in a mine somewhere in Poland. Every few years, a new lead appears, followed by disappointment and the collective sigh of historians everywhere. Russia rebuilt it in 2003 from old photos and fragments. It's beautiful, but it's also a reminder that even palaces can just disappear. One moment, you're showing off your golden room. The next, it's a legend. The Roman dodecahedrons, the ancient fidget toys moving westward. We stumble upon one of Rome's quiet mysteries, the Roman dodecahedron. Small, hollow bronze objects with 12 flat sides, each punched with circular holes and little knobs on the corners. About the size of an orange, over 100 have been found scattered across Europe. dating to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, and absolutely no one knows what they were for. Theories range from candle holders to dice. 2 tools for knitting gloves, a personal favorite, 2 astronomical instruments. One archaeologist even suggested they were fortune-telling devices, because when in doubt, blame the occult. What's especially odd is that there's 0 written mention of them anywhere in Roman texts. The Romans documented everything: taxes, recipes, their enemies' facial hair, but not these things. So they sit in museums now, shiny and mysterious, like ancient stress balls that no one wants to admit were probably just decorative. If there's one thing history proves, it's that humans have always loved making objects whose purpose we immediately forget. The Phaistos disc, Bronze Age, record or elaborate prank, from Italy we glide to Crete, where in 1908 an archaeologist named Luigi Pernier unearthed a disc of fired clay covered in spiraling symbols, about the size of a CD. If you remember those, each side bears 45 unique symbols stamped with little seals. Humans, animals, tools, plants. Nobody's seen this script anywhere else. It's the Phaistos disc, dating to around 1700 BC. Scholars have tried for over a century to read it. Some think it's a hymn. Others say it's an inventory, a calendar, a game board, or maybe the world's oldest emoji chain. The trouble is, there's only one example. You can't decipher a language with a single page. It's like finding one text message and trying to build a dictionary from it every few years. Someone claims to have cracked it, and the academic world politely disagrees. Meanwhile, the disc just sits there in the Heraclean Museum, smirking in clay, perfectly aware that it's never giving up its secret. The Voynich manuscript, medieval nonsense or alien cookbooker. The Voynich manuscript, the darling of cryptographers and conspiracy theorists alike. Discovered in 1912 by book dealer Wilfred Voynich. It's a 15th century handwritten codex filled with looping, unreadable text and bizarre illustrations of plants that don't exist. There are also naked women, bathing in green liquid tubes, celestial charts, and recipes for who knows what. It's like someone in the Middle Ages decided to write a science textbook after too much mead. Every codebreaker from Alan Turing's colleagues to modern AI models has taken a shot at decoding it. None have succeeded. Some think it's a lost language. Others think it's an elaborate hoax by a bored monk with artistic ambitions. Radiocarbon dating confirms the parchment is authentic, mid-1400s. The ink, too, meaning if it is a hoax, it's an ancient one, and honestly, that level of commitment deserves respect. Today it lives in Yale's Beinecke Library, locked in a climate-controlled room. Scholars still stare at its pages, convincing themselves that the next symbol might make sense. It never does. It's the literary equivalent of trying to read your cat's diary. The crown jewels of Ireland vanished without a trace. Jumping forward to 1907 Dublin, we find another mystery, one with velvet cushions, guards, and no happy ending. The crown jewels of Ireland. Actually, the insignia of the Order of St. Patrick were stored in Dublin Castle. Jewels worth about what you'd expect royal bling to be worth, enough to buy several small nations. Then, just before King Edward VII's visit, they were gone, vanished. No sign of forced entry, no broken locks, just empty cases and red faces. Investigations followed, complete with finger-pointing, political gossip, and the eventual conclusion that someone inside probably did it. The jewels were never found. Some say they were melted down, Others claim they're in a private collection somewhere, quietly sparkling in secret. It remains one of history's most polite heists. No violence, no arrests. Just a missing treasure and a lot of embarrassment. Sometimes, even in the age of modern locks, the universe just decides. You've had enough shiny things. The cup, Roman nanotechnology. Because sure now, let's talk about a cup, but not just any cup. The Lycurgus cup, a Roman glass goblet from the 4th century AD, does something incredible. It changes color depending on the light. Green when lit from the front, blood red when lit from behind. It's not magic. It's science, nanoscience to be specific. The glass contains microscopic particles of gold and silver that scatter light differently, meaning Roman artisans accidentally invented a technology we wouldn't understand again until the 20th century. The cup shows the myth of King Lycurgus, trapped in vines for offending Dionysus, a cheerful theme for your evening drinkware. It survived somehow, passing through centuries of collectors before ending up in the British Museum, where it glows softly in its case. Like a piece of divine mood lighting, you can almost imagine some Roman senator holding it up at a banquet, saying, "Check this out," completely unaware he's holding the first nano device in history. The mask of Agamemnon, the king who probably never existed back to Greece, 1876. The excavation of Mycenae. Archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, treasure hunter, storyteller, and possible exaggerator, unearthed a gold funerary mask on the face of a skeleton. He declared, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." It made headlines. The supposed mask of the legendary king from the Iliad had been found, except minor issue. The mask was about 400 years older than Agamemnon would have lived. So unless Homer's timeline was wildly off, Schliemann had, in modern terms, gone viral for fake news. Still, the mask is genuine and stunning. Hammered gold, serene expression, mustache included. It's just not Agamemnon, but it's easy to forgive him. After all, if you spend your life chasing myths, you're bound to start seeing them in every glint of gold, the copper scroll. A treasure map that doesn't want to be found. Let's drift one last time into the desert. Back near the Dead Sea, but a different cave. In 1952, archaeologists found a scroll made of pure copper. Instead of scripture, it listed treasure, tons of it. Gold, silver, hidden in dozens of locations. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, this one wasn't symbolic. It read like someone's shopping list for divine loot. Naturally, treasure hunters got excited. Decades of searches followed. None of the hoards were ever found. Scholars now think it might have been a record of temple offerings. Or maybe just wishful thinking carved in metal. Either way, it's the ancient equivalent of a fantasy map. The kind that makes you believe there's still a cave somewhere waiting to surprise a shepherd again. The calm after the dig. So here we are at the edge of the first hour. We've wandered through deserts and seas, palaces and shipwrecks, from golden masks to bronze gears to jars pretending to be batteries. Every artifact whispers the same quiet. Story, people made things, loved them, lost them, and centuries later, someone else stumbled upon them and called it history. Some of these relics explain us. Others just confuse us. But they all do one thing perfectly. They remind us that everything we build, no matter how shiny or sacred, eventually joins the earth again. Drifting back to the surface, and now, we've reached that quiet part of the night where the dust has settled and time feels stretched thin, like parchment. We've wandered through golden tombs and drowned ships. We've met rocks that spoke 3 languages. jars that maybe hummed with electricity, and ancient discs that refuse to make sense. We've seen gods carved in clay, emperors buried with armies, and scientists from centuries ago who didn't know they were inventing the future. Every one of these things, the Rosetta Stone, the Antikythera mechanism, the terracotta army, the Venus of Willendorf, they were made by hands. Real people, people who got hungry, got tired, maybe argued with their co-workers, and still made something that somehow lasted thousands of years, longer than they did. That's the secret heartbeat of archaeology. Not the treasure, not the mystery, just the quiet continuity of touch. Someone carved it, someone buried it, someone else found it, and the rest of us just keep staring, whispering guesses into the void. If you look at it that way, history isn't so much about the powerful or the famous. It's about persistence. About how even dust refuses to disappear completely. The dreamy logic of the lost artifacts have a strange kind of logic. They vanish because people move on. Civilizations crumble, fires burn, floods wash through, and suddenly something priceless becomes invisible. And then, one day, a farmer's shovel or a diver's net brings it back. The universe is oddly patient that way. It hides things just long enough for us to forget them, then gives them back when we're finally curious again. It's almost as if history likes to be rediscovered, like it needs a little mystery to stay interesting. After all, if we found every artifact, if every story was complete, there'd be nothing left to dream about. So the lost things stay half hidden. They give us just enough clues to argue for centuries, to build museums, to make documentaries, to whisper their names into microphones long after midnight. The soft weight of time. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're walking through an endless hall of glass cases, each one dimly lit. Inside, a different object hums with quiet meaning. A chipped tablet, a golden clasp, a bronze gear that still thinks it's tracking the stars. You lean closer, and for a moment, the object almost speaks. But not in words, just in presence. It says, "I was here, I mattered. Someone made me." And then the silence swells again. That's the kind of silence this series is built for. The calm, humming quiet of old things that survived by accident. The ones that weren't supposed to, but did anyway. Where every candle flickers against a wall of forgotten stories. And every legend feels just barely believable after midnight tonight. We're wandering through the relics that were too holy, too precious, or too ridiculous to survive intact. Things that were worshipped, stolen, broken, hidden, or just quietly misplaced over the centuries. Because if there's one thing people are great at, it's losing the things they swear they'll protect forever. So, tuck in. The past is waiting again, patient as always. The Holy Grail, the world's most overrated couplets, start with the big one. The Holy Grail, aka Christianity's favorite missing dishware, according to legend. It's the cup Jesus used at the Last Supper, and later, the same one that caught his blood during the crucifixion. Basically, the ultimate sacred souvenir. But here's the thing, the Bible never actually calls it holy, never calls it a grail, and never suggests anyone kept it. The whole concept popped up in medieval Europe, specifically in 12th century French poetry. A knightly author named Chrétien de Troyes decided the Arthurian legends needed a bit more sparkle and invented a mystical cup that promised eternal grace. And because medieval audiences loved a good side quest, the Grail became the most famous object nobody ever found. Since then, at least half a dozen churches, and museums have claimed to have the real Grail. There's the one in Valencia, the one in Genoa, the one in Wales, and at least one that turned out to be a fancy soup bowl. And the best part, the Vatican officially doesn't endorse any of them, which is kind of like God saying, I've lost count too. Over time, the Grail stopped being about the cup itself and became more of an idea. Something pure, unattainable, always just out of reach. Which, let's be honest, is peak human behavior. We turn a dinner cup into a lifelong obsession and call it faith, the spear of destiny. The pointiest relic in history of the Grail is the ultimate cup. Then this is the ultimate stick. The Holy Lance, also called the Spear of Destiny, supposedly pierced Jesus' side during the crucifixion. It shows up in the Gospel of John, where a Roman soldier named Longinus thrusts his spear to confirm Jesus' death. Later, legend gave that soldier a redemption arc, a sainthood, and a growing myth that his spear carried divine power. Over the centuries, several versions of the lance appeared across Europe. One ended up in Vienna, another in Krakow, another in Armenia. Everyone, it seems, had a spear and a good story. The Vienna one, kept in the Hofburg Palace, is the most famous. It's a piece of iron with a small nail in the center, allegedly from the true cross. It's been through more wars and ceremonies than most. Countries. Medieval emperors carried it into battle as a talisman. Charlemagne supposedly had it. So did Otto the Great. And, yes, the Nazis got involved too. Hitler believed the spear would grant him divine victory. Spoiler, it didn't. Today, it's still on display, looking about as holy as a rusty barbecue skewer. But people keep visiting, because nothing attracts curiosity like the promise of destiny in physical form. The true cross, the world's most fragmented relic. Now we move to another sacred object with a bit of a storage problem. The true cross, the wooden cross on which Jesus was crucified in the 4th century. Saint Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, supposedly traveled to Jerusalem, excavated a few hills, and miraculously found it. She also conveniently found the crosses of the 2 thieves, the nails, and a handful of other souvenirs. The true cross was enshrined, worshipped, kissed, and eventually divided, and divided again. And again, by the late Middle Ages, there were so many fragments of the true cross floating around Europe that one wit said there was enough wood to build a ship, which may have been an exaggeration, but also maybe not. Still, the devotion was real. Pilgrims traveled thousands of miles just to glimpse a splinter of wood behind glass. Kings went to war for it. Crusaders claimed it could bring victory until they lost it in battle, proving that maybe divine carpentry has limits. Today, hundreds of churches still claim to hold small pieces. Most are likely genuine, small, ancient, and handled with reverence. But the irony remains. A symbol of unity scattered into thousands of pieces. The Ark of Noah, the world's most persistent boat hunt. Let's climb a mountain next, literally. The Ark of Noah, the famous wooden ship that allegedly survived the Great Flood, has been found about 30 times. The Bible says it came to rest on Mount Ararat in modern-day Turkey. And for centuries, explorers, monks, and more than a few conspiracy theorists have gone searching for it. In the 19th century, an Armenian monk claimed to have seen it. In the 20th century, several pilots thought they spotted a shape under the ice. And in the 21st, satellite images and drone footage got involved. Each time, excitement builds, and each time, nothing verifiable. Most scientists point out that wooden ships don't last thousands of years on mountains. They rot, they vanish. But that doesn't stop the search. Because the Ark isn't really a boat anymore, it's a symbol. A hope that somewhere, proof of survival and divine mercy still sits frozen in time. Maybe that's the appeal. We know it's probably gone, but we keep looking anyway. The Philosopher's Stone, because alchemists were the original chemists, okay. Technically, not an artifact anyone's found, or maybe ever existed, but it deserves a spot. The Philosopher's Stone was the alchemist's ultimate dream, a mysterious red substance that could turn base metals into gold, cure any disease, and grant eternal life. Medieval scholars wrote about it obsessively. They drew diagrams, blended mercury with sulfur, and nearly blew themselves up chasing immortality for something that doesn't exist. It had incredible job security. Famous thinkers like Isaac Newton, Roger Bacon, and Paracelsus all took it seriously. Newton, in particular, left behind hundreds of pages of alchemical notes. Apparently, calculus wasn't challenging enough in the end. The stone was never found, but alchemy laid the groundwork for modern chemistry. The stone, in a sense, did its job. It turned superstition into science, just not in the way anyone expected. So maybe the real Philosopher's Stone was the friends we accidentally poisoned along the way. The Library of Alexandria, humanity's great unlearning. This one's not a single artifact. It's an entire civilization's hard drive. The Library of Alexandria was founded in Egypt around 280 BC, meant to collect all human knowledge in one place. Scrolls from every known culture, science, literature, philosophy, all piled together in an ancient dream of universal understanding. It's said to have housed hundreds of thousands of texts, and then it burned. Possibly several times. No one's sure who destroyed it. Some blame Julius Caesar's army in 48 BC, others say later Roman rulers or Christian zealots finished the job. It might have simply decayed over centuries. Either way, it's gone, along with untold works of Greek drama, Egyptian history, and who knows what else. Historians often mourn the loss, like a collective cultural amnesia. But maybe that's part of the point. Human knowledge isn't permanent. It's fragile, flammable, and constantly rewritten. The library might be gone, but its idea, the belief that knowledge should be shared, somehow survived. Every modern library, archive, and even, yes, every overworked history YouTuber is a tiny echo of that lost dream. The Stone of Destiny, the rock with job security. Let's move to Scotland. A land full of wind, legends, and, surprisingly political rocks, the Stone of Scone. Also called the Stone of Destiny, was used for centuries in the coronation of Scottish kings. A simple sandstone block, roughly the size of a dorm fridge, but revered as a symbol of royal legitimacy. In 1296, King Edward I of England invaded Scotland, grabbed the stone, and installed it under his throne at Westminster Abbey. Because if you're going to steal something, make sure every future monarch has to sit on it. And they did, for over 600 years. Then, in 1950, 4 Scottish students decided enough was enough. They broke into Westminster Abbey on Christmas Eve and smuggled the stone back to Scotland. It cracked in two on the way, but hey, symbolism counts. Eventually, it was returned officially in 1996 and now rests in Edinburgh Castle, only travelling to London when needed for a coronation. Few rocks can claim that level of job security. The Buddha's tooth, sacred molar, endless dramas. Even Buddhism has a relic with royal-level intrigue. The tooth relic of the Buddha, legend says it was taken from his funeral pyre in 543 BC, smuggled through kingdoms, stolen by invaders, and worshipped by emperors. Today, it's said to reside in the Temple of the Tooth in Kandy, Sri Lanka, a golden casket within a temple within a shrine, surrounded by flowers, incense, and occasionally armed guards. Wars have been fought over it. Dynasties claimed legitimacy through it. At one point, someone tried to destroy it, only for the relic to miraculously reappear unharmed. Whether that's divine intervention or very clever PR, who's to say? Whatever the truth, it's a reminder that faith has a funny way of attaching itself to tangible things, even the ones small enough to fit in your palm. The Mechanical Turk, the world's first fake robot, and now for something a bit more recent. The Mechanical Turk, an 18th century automaton that amazed audiences by playing chess against humans and winning it was. Presented by Hungarian inventor Wolfgang von Kempelen, 1770. The machine looked like a life-sized figure dressed in Turkish robes, seated behind a cabinet filled with gears and levers. It toured Europe, playing and beating nobles, generals, even Napoleon, except it wasn't a robot. Hidden inside was a human chess master. The whole thing was an elaborate illusion. Early artificial intelligence, powered by cramped genius. The Turk toured for decades, fooling nearly everyone before being destroyed in a fire in 1854. Today, it feels oddly prophetic, a preview of humanity's obsession with making machines that appear smarter than they are. Kind of like YouTube comments. Really, the hand of St. James. When relics get a little too literal, let's start with something simple, a hand. Not a metaphorical one. A real, physical, centuries-old hand. The hand of St. James the Apostle, also called the hand of St. James the Greater, has been one of Christianity's more unsettling relics for about 1,000 years. It's a mummified right hand, believed to have once belonged to one of Jesus' closest followers, the one who allegedly evangelized Spain before being martyred in Jerusalem, according to tradition. His remains were brought back to Santiago de Compostela, the great pilgrimage site in Spain, but for reasons lost to medieval paperwork, his hand apparently took a different route, ending up at Reading Abbey in England around the 12th century. It stayed there until Henry VIII decided monasteries were overrated and demolished. The place during his Reformation, the relic vanished for centuries, then resurfaced in 1786 in a private collection. It bounced around Europe until finally finding a permanent home at St. Peter's Church in Marlow. It's kept in a golden reliquary shaped like, well, a hand. A hand inside a hand. History has a sense of humor like that. The crown of thorns, a relic with frequent flyer miles next up. The crown of thorns. Yes, that one. The one Jesus supposedly wore during the crucifixion. It's said to have been found by Saint Helena. She really had a knack for divine scavenger hunts, and eventually brought to Constantinople. For centuries, it sat in the imperial treasury until the Crusades, when Emperor Baldwin II needed money and did what any desperate royal would do. He pawned it. King Louis IX of France bought it in 1238, paid off the debt, and built Sainte-Chapelle in Paris just to house it. A stained glass jewel box of a church that basically screams holy flex. The crown remained there until the French Revolution, when angry citizens decided relics were out of fashion. Somehow it survived, tucked away in the vaults of Notre Dame Cathedral, where it stayed until the 2019 fire. Firefighters saved it. The same relic that supposedly crowned Christ nearly 2 millennia earlier. Now stored in the Louvre under careful watch, it's an odd feeling, knowing the same thorny circle that once symbolized humiliation now rests behind bulletproof glass, admired by tourists in shorts. History loves irony. The relics of the true nails, the iron that wouldn't rust if you've been counting. You might have noticed something strange. For an event with only 3 nails, there are dozens of true nails scattered across. Europe, the nails of the crucifixion are among Christianity's most contested relics. Constantinople once claimed to have 2. Rome claimed another. Milan, Trier, and Carpentras each displayed their own. Some are long and spiked, others small and decorative. Many are now embedded in crosses, crowns, or reliquaries. Most probably aren't nails at all, just medieval interpretations of what they should look like. Still, people came to see them. They prayed. They touched the glass. Because even if the relics aren't authentic, the faith surrounding them is. Maybe that's the point. It's not about proving history. It's about giving shape to belief. Iron rusts, but devotion doesn't. The Mandalion of Edessa, the world's first selfie. Now let's head east, to a legend that sounds suspiciously like divine photography. The Mandalion of Edessa, also called the Image of Edessa, was a piece of cloth said to bear the face of Jesus. Not painted, not woven, just imprinted. According to 4th century tradition, King Abgar of Edessa fell ill and wrote to Jesus asking for healing. Jesus supposedly sent back a reply and, conveniently, a cloth with his face miraculously transferred onto it. The king recovered, and the relic was enshrined. Over centuries, it became one of the most revered icons in the Byzantine world. Some scholars believe it might even be the same object later known as the Shroud of Turin, folded differently and retold through legend. Whether it was a painting, a relic, or a very early case of divine branding, it reminds us that people have always wanted proof of presence. Something visible to touch faith with, because a story you can see feels more believable than one you can only imagine. The Black Stone of Mecca, heaven's oldest stone now. Let's drift into Islam's most sacred relic, the Black Stone. Set into the Kaaba in Mecca, it's said to have fallen from heaven, given to Abraham by the angel Gabriel as a sign of God's covenant. Pilgrims circle it during the Hajj, reaching out to touch or kiss it if they can. No one knows exactly what it is. Some say it's basalt. Others think it's a meteorite, or even ancient glass formed by desert lightning. What's certain is that it's been there for thousands of years, darkened and worn smooth by countless hands. The stone has endured fires, sieges, and thefts. Yes, someone actually stole it in the 10th century. A radical sect called the Karmatians raided Mecca, took the stone, and held it hostage for over 20 years before returning it. It came back in pieces, reassembled with silver rings to hold it together, even shattered. It remains the most touched object in the world, a fragment of heaven, bound together by human hands. The Buddha's bowl, the traveling dish of enlightenment. We can't talk about holy relics without mentioning the alms bowl of the Buddha, the simple dish said to have been used by Siddhartha Gautama himself. According to legend, it passed through India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Afghanistan, and eventually ended up in Kabul, where it was worshipped for centuries. before vanishing again in the 7th century. Several temples across Asia now claim to have it, or at least a version of it. Each one is handled with extreme care, often displayed during special festivals, bathed in flowers, and watched over by monks who treat it as both sacred and symbolic. What's poetic is that a single bowl, a symbol of humility, meant to hold whatever food was given, became one of the most revered objects in Buddhist history. Even the simplest things can turn divine once enough people remember them. The staff of Moses. The original magic wand now lets wade into the wilderness of the Old Testament. The staff of Moses, according to Scripture, parted the Red Sea, summoned plagues, and struck rocks to bring forth water. Basically, the most powerful walking stick in history. Jewish and Islamic traditions both claim to know where it ended up. Some say it was passed down to Aaron, then hidden in the Ark of the Covenant. Others say it was found centuries later by King David in Ethiopia. A monastery on Lake Tana claims to guard the staff, along with several other biblical relics, because apparently they collect them like trading cards. No proof, of course, but the image endures. An old man leaning on a staff that once defied kings. Maybe it wasn't about the stick itself. Maybe it was about the hand that held it steady while the impossible happened. The sword of St. Peter. When apostles get armor-danned because no religion can resist a good weapon story. Let's talk about St. Peter's sword in the Gospel of John. Peter cuts off the ear of a Roman soldier during Jesus' arrest, a quick, messy act of loyalty. Tradition says that sword was kept as a relic in Poland, where it's still displayed at the Archdiocesan Museum in Poznań. It's a broad, heavy blade, probably ceremonial, possibly medieval, and definitely not from 1st century Jerusalem. But for believers, that doesn't matter. The symbolism's stronger than the steel. A fisherman turned apostle turned swordsman. The image alone is worth preserving. The bones of saints. Holy skeleton economy by the Middle Ages. Relics weren't just sacred. They were an industry. Churches competed to attract pilgrims, and pilgrims came for relics. Bones, teeth, skulls, hair, even clothing. If a saint sneezed near something, it was probably venerated within a decade. And since demand exceeded supply, the market got creative. It wasn't uncommon for multiple churches to claim the same saint's head. At one point, there were 3 heads of John the Baptist on display in different countries. People joked about it even back then. Erasmus, the Renaissance scholar, once wrote that there were enough pieces of the true cross and saintly skeletons to build a shipload. Still, pilgrims came. They prayed. They left offerings, because maybe they knew the relics weren't always real. But the feeling they inspired was, faith doesn't really care about carbon dating. The holy prepuce, a relic too awkward to handle and, finally, because history never runs out of ways to be strange. We come to the most infamous lost relic of all, the holy prepuce, also known, yes, as the foreskin of Christ. It was supposedly saved from his circumcision and passed down as a holy relic. Medieval Europe treated it with utmost reverence, at least as much reverence as one can show for such a relic at one point. More than a dozen churches claimed to have it. Popes blessed it, pilgrims prayed before it, and theologians argued over whether it ascended to heaven with the rest of Christ's body. By the Renaissance. The church quietly started pretending it didn't exist. The last known holy prepuce was stolen from a small town in Italy in 1983, and has never been seen again, which, honestly, might be for the best. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Settling into the silent sand, there it is. A parade of relics, both sacred and absurd, wrapped in gold. Guarded by centuries of belief. Every one of them started as something small. A nail, a tooth, a stick, a scrap of cloth. Then came the stories, and the stories turned them into miracles. Maybe that's the real relic, the story itself. The way humans can take something ordinary and make it eternal just by remembering it long enough. So, as the candlelight fades, and the relics slip back into their jeweled cases. Let's take a deep breath and step quietly out of this chapter, because faith and mystery aren't so different. Both are just ways of holding on to the invisible. The dust of devotion, it's funny when you think about it. Every relic we've drifted past tonight, every bone, chalice, thorn, and gilded box, started as something simple. Wood, stone, metal, skin. They weren't born holy. People made them that way. Someone touched a thing and said, "This matters." And once enough people believed that, it became eternal. That's the secret rhythm of faith and history. Objects turn into symbols. Symbols turn into stories. And stories, once told often enough, stop needing proof. They just are. The crown that drew blood becomes a relic. The stone that fell from the sky becomes divine. The hand that once blessed others is preserved in gold centuries later, still blessing strangers through glass. It's a strange kind of immortality, the one that smells faintly of incense and dust, what we keep. And what keeps us humans are collectors by instinct. We hold on to things long after their meaning has faded, just to feel continuity. Proof that we were part of something bigger once. That's what relics really are, emotional fossils. They hold the echo of belief, their memory made tangible. Maybe that's why they survive longer than empires. Armies march, palaces crumble, rulers fade into footnotes. But someone will always be there, dusting the glass case around a fragment of bone, whispering a prayer they don't entirely understand. It's not about certainty. It's about comfort. And comfort lasts longer than truth. The long quiet somewhere, right now, a relic sits in darkness. No tourists. No pilgrims. Just silence. A golden reliquary in a locked chapel. A broken jar in desert sand. A meteorite set into the wall of a shrine. And even there, untouched, it still holds power because people remember it. Belief has a half-life all its own. Centuries from now, when new faiths rise and the old ones fade, someone will still find these relics. They'll study them, speculate, maybe laugh a little, and then, without realizing it, start believing again, just in a quieter way. Because the past never really ends. It just waits to be rediscovered. Hey, again. You know that moment right before you fall asleep, when the mind drifts, and everything feels like it's floating just below the surface of memory. That's where we're going tonight. Because history isn't just built, it's buried. Every city, every kingdom, every eternal empire eventually ends up under someone else's feet. And when we dig deep enough, we don't just find bricks and bones. We find the noise of entire worlds that once thought they'd last forever. So, tuck yourself in. The ground beneath you remembers more than you think. Pompeii, the city that froze in mid-sentence, let's start in Italy. Or rather, 79 AD Italy, when the Roman Empire was at its glittering, wine-soaked height. Pompeii was a seaside town for the comfortably rich. Villas with courtyards, mosaics that bragged about how much money you had, frescoes that definitely weren't safe for Sunday school. And then, one late August morning, Mount Vesuvius sneezed. A thick, grey column of ash shot miles into the sky. People watched, curious at first. Then the ash began to fall, thicker, hotter, faster. Most tried to flee. Some stayed, covering their mouths with cloth, thinking it would pass. By nightfall, the city was silent. Then came the pyroclastic flow, a surge of heat so fast and final that it turned human bodies into outlines in ash dot when archaeologists uncovered Pompeii in the 18th century. They found life, literally, mid-pause. Bread still in ovens. Dogs still chained. People still curled up in their final shelters. It's haunting, but also strangely peaceful. The city didn't decay. It simply stopped. If you visit today, the streets are eerily quiet, the frescoes still bright. It feels less like ruins and more like a dream someone pressed pause on 2,000 years ago. Herculaneum, Pompeii's quieter neighbor a few miles away. Herculaneum suffered the same fate, only faster and hotter. While Pompeii was smothered in ash, Herculaneum was flash-cooked by a volcanic cloud at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. The result? Everything burned, and then, paradoxically, was preserved. Wooden doors, scrolls in a villa's library, furniture, food. In the 18th century, explorers tunneling through the ash stumbled upon entire rooms still intact. They even found a library, the Villa of the Papyri, crammed with hundreds of carbonized scrolls. They were black and brittle, unreadable until modern imaging peeled them open virtually. Turns out they were full of Epicurean philosophy. Calm words from men who preached tranquility while the world literally burned. The irony would have made them proud. Troy, the city that refused to stay lost. Now we move east, across the Aegean Sea to the windswept plains of history. In modern Turkey, for centuries, Troy was dismissed as myth. A poetic backdrop for Homer's Iliad, a stage for heroes, gods, and that unfortunate wooden horse incident. Then came Heinrich Schliemann, a 19th century businessman with too much money and not enough chill. Convinced Homer was telling the truth, he started digging, and destroying layers of history as he went. Because subtlety was not his strong suit. But he found something. The walls of an ancient city, burned and buried. Then another city beneath it. And another. 9 Troys stacked on top of each other like a geological lasagna of ambition. Was one of them the Troy? Probably. Which one? That's still an argument for archaeologists at conferences. What matters is that myth became matter. A story told by poets turned out to have bricks, gates, and ashes behind it. That's the magic of dirt. It doesn't care what's real. It just keeps the evidence. Babylon, the city that built itself out of pride further east. In the sun-baked plains of Iraq lies Babylon, or what's left of it. Once, it was the jewel of Mesopotamia, the city of Nebuchadnezzar II, the supposed home of the Hanging Gardens. Those legendary terraces that may or may not have existed but sounded fabulous in Greek travel guides. The city was immense, full of ziggurats, temples, and processional roads lined with blue-glazed lions. Babylon even had its own brand of overconfidence. The Tower of Babel kind. Then came conquest after conquest. Persians, Greeks, Romans, Parthians. By the time Alexander the Great arrived, Babylon was already crumbling. He planned to rebuild it, but died first, in Babylon, of course. Because irony likes to stick the landing, now. Its ruins rest quietly near the Euphrates, sun-baked bricks, dust, and broken reliefs. The kind of place where even the wind sounds ancient. Persepolis, the Persian Empire's forgotten palace while Babylon fell. Persepolis rose, the ceremonial capital of the Persian kings. Built by Darius the Great around 518 BC, it was meant to be eternal. Wide stairways, grand halls, reliefs of envoys from every corner of the empire bringing gifts, and it might have lasted if Alexander hadn't burned it down in a drunken fit of revenge for Athens. Accounts say he regretted it the next morning. History's earliest hangover remorse. The ruins sat buried for centuries, sand slowly reclaiming marble. When archaeologists uncovered them, the carvings were still crisp. Rows of soldiers, each face different, proof that even ancient empires understood diversity better than we sometimes do today. Persepolis stands quiet against the desert hills, half raced by time, half preserved by it. Stone doesn't mind waiting. Angykor, the jungle's slow embrace. Now let's wander south, into Cambodia's humid green heart, the lost city of Angykor in the 12th century. It was the capital of the Khmer Empire, one of the largest cities in the world. Temples carved from stone, moats, causeways, towers aligned to the stars. And then, silence. Historians still debate why it fell. Climate change, invasions, overextension. Maybe the jungle just took back what was hers. By the time French explorers stumbled upon Angkor Wat in the 19th century, tree roots had wrapped around its towers like patient fingers. Nature had turned architecture into sculpture today. Angkor Wat is cleaned, restored, and photographed endlessly. But part of its power is the stillness, the reminder that no matter how high we build, the trees are always waiting. Machu Picchu, the city above the clouds, let's climb now, high into the Andes, where the air thins and the clouds drift below your feet. Machu Picchu. The Incan citadel was hidden for centuries. Built around 1450, abandoned within a century, then swallowed by forest. When American explorer Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it in 1911, locals had known it for generations, they just hadn't told anyone. Bingham called it the lost city of the Incas, which wasn't accurate. But it sold books. Machu Picchu wasn't really lost, just overlooked. It was a royal retreat, a place where Incan priests studied the stars and emperors took their version of spa days. What makes it haunting isn't its mystery, but its perfection. Terraces, temples, and stairways carved with such precision they still fit without mortar. It's as if the mountain and the city decided to merge, and then quietly agreed to forget the world below. Petra, the rose-red ghost of the desert deep in Jordan's sandstone cliffs, lies Petra, the rose-red city half as old as time, for centuries. It was hidden, a caravan hub for the Nabatees, who carved temples, tombs, and entire facades directly into the rock. When trade routes shifted, Petra was abandoned. The desert moved in, silent and patient, in 1812. A Swiss explorer disguised as an Arab pilgrim rediscovered it, or, more accurately, was led there by Bedouins who had known about it all along. Now thousands walk through its narrow canyon, the sick until the treasury appears, glowing pink at sunrise. It's cinematic, calm, and slightly surreal, like walking into someone else's forgotten dream. Petra proves that beauty doesn't need to survive perfectly to endure. Even broken, it glows. Teotihuacan, the city of the gods that forgot its builders. Outside modern Mexico City lie the ruins of Teotihuacan. Built more than 2,000 years ago. By whom, exactly? No one's sure. When the Aztecs arrived centuries later, they found it deserted and named it the place where the gods were born. They walked its silent avenues, stared at the pyramids of the sun and moon, and assumed no humans could have built something so massive. They were wrong. Of course, but you can't blame them for thinking it. The city's layout aligns with celestial events. Its architecture mathematical and serene. Eventually, Teotihuacan collapsed, perhaps from internal revolt or environmental strain. Its people vanished into the surrounding valleys, leaving behind nothing but perfect geometry and eternal mystery. It's easy to forget that ruins aren't just remnants of failure. Sometimes they're the only way to make something last. Atlantis, the city that never needed to exist. The granddaddy of all lost cities. Atlantis, first mentioned by Plato in the 4th century BC as a cautionary tale about arrogance. Atlantis was supposedly a powerful island that sank in a single day and night. That's it. That's the entire ancient source. 2 paragraphs that somehow launched thousands of years of obsession. Explorers have found Atlantis everywhere. The Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Antarctica, even on Mars. Each new claim fades quietly when someone points out that Plato probably made the whole thing up to teach philosophy. Students not to get too full of themselves. But Atlantis endures. Not because it's real, but because it's possible. It's every vanished city rolled into one symbol. The fear that all greatness eventually sinks. The stillness beneath our feet, and now we're back where we started. Standing above the dirt, knowing how much sleeps beneath it. Every empire thought it was forever. Every wall once shone with fresh paint. Every marketplace buzzed with laughter. And now it's dust, but not gone. The earth remembers. It always does. When we dig, we're not disturbing the past. We're waking it up, gently, respectfully, with a brush instead of a blade. Each shard, each coin, each footprint in ancient clay says the same thing. We were here. We mattered, and maybe that's all anyone wants, to be remembered. Even if it's just as part of someone else's late-night monologue. The last echoes of stone so, here we are again, at the edge of history's quietest places. Cities that once blazed with torches, laughter, and ambition now sit under the same indifferent sky. Wrapped in silence, Pompeii sleeps beneath ash, her streets still waiting for footsteps that will never return. Angkor hums softly under roots that remember every brick. Babylon breathes heat and emptiness, her walls long crumbled into dust that still smells faintly of empire. And we, the wanderers, stand above it all, brushing at the surface, holding fragments in our hands, pretending for a moment that the world hasn't already ended 1,000 times before. That's the secret about ruins. They're not really about loss. They're proof that the world keeps starting over, the weight of forgetting every civilization thinks it's permanent. They build towers, carve their names in stone, write laws in languages they assume will never fade. And then centuries pass, the wind picks up, and the words blur. What's left isn't failure, it's perspective. Time doesn't destroy. It edits. Each lost city was a reminder that progress isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, collapsing, rebuilding, forgetting, remembering. Pompeii fell. Rome rose. Rome fell. Someone else picked up the brick and started again. It's humbling and strangely comforting. knowing that even the grandest empires end up as lessons, not legacies. Listening to the ground. If you've ever stood in a ruin, you know the feeling. It's quiet, but not empty. The air feels thicker, like it's remembering. Archaeologists say the earth preserves what people forget. But maybe the earth isn't preserving at all. Maybe it's just listening, holding the echoes, because no one else will. That's why we dig. Not for gold or glory, but for conversation. We ask the ground questions, and sometimes it answers. In pottery shards, in bones, in silence that feels almost like speech. It never says everything, just enough to keep us curious. The dream of endings. Every ruin tells the same bedtime story. Once there was a city. It thought it would last forever. It didn't. But look closer. Forever isn't measured in years, it's measured in memory. Pompeii lasted because people still whisper her name. Babylon still stands in the way we talk about arrogance. Atlantis endures as every city's reflection in the floodwater. The walls are gone, but the ideas survived. That's history's quiet mercy, falling asleep among the ruins. And now the night is still again. The dust settles. The stones cool. Somewhere, a bat glides through an open arch that used to be a window. The moon traces the outlines of temples no one worships in anymore. Maybe that's the perfect ending. Not destruction, but rest. Civilizations don't die. They just go to sleep and let the next one dream. So close your eyes, traveler. Listen to the ground beneath you. It's full of stories. Empires hum faintly under your feet. Old roads still remember the sound of sandals. And the air itself carries the patience of centuries. Everything lost is just waiting to be quiet again.